Okay, so where we left off, the dean went to confront Cooper, and he flat out accused him. We'll see what happens. All right, here we go. Oh, wait, am I recording? I think I'm recording. All right. Chapter 16. When Alice awoke again, it was light in her prison. She was cramped and hungry. Her head and throat ached awfully, but she was alive. That, she thought, was a start. Now what to do? With a great deal of effort, she managed to get into a sitting position and look around. The room was completely bare of any furniture other than a small brazier Father Cooper had brought. The walls were stone, the windows were arched and slatted with horizontal boards. She knit her brow. Where could she be? From her sitting position, she could see a trap door in the floor. Now she thought, if only she could get her hands and legs free and get rid of this horrible gag. She looked around the room for something sharp she could use as a tool, but there was nothing except the brazier and a bag of wood. The brazier! She worked her way carefully over to it. The fire had died down to a few sullen embers, but the metal sides were still faintly warm, too warm for her to touch comfortably. Perhaps it would work. Moving gingerly, she turned around. Carefully, she put her wrists in the rope that bound them against the rim and rubbed the cord back and forth. It hurt. The rim was not red hot, but it was hot all the same, and the metal was rather rough. The operation was further complicated by her inability to see what she was doing. But before she reached the point where she couldn't bear it any longer, she felt the cord begin to give. She wrenched her wrists hard. The cord bit painfully into her sore arms, but the rope broke. As soon as her hand recovered their feeling, she worked the gag off. Then she started on the ropes binding her legs. Father Cooper had done his work well, Alice found. With fingers so stiff and cold she could not untie the knots. She would have screamed with frustration except it hurt her throat too much. Finally, though, she managed to get to her feet by hopping awkwardly. She made her way to the trap door. She couldn't budge it. Father Cooper must have fastened it from the outside. Blast! She croaked hoarsely. Blast, blast, blast! Well, if she couldn't get out, perhaps she could call attention to herself in some way. Geoffrey must have figured out what happened to her by now. He would be looking for her, and probably with the others. She made her way to the windows and began trying to work loose one of the slats. She would never have succeeded except that some of the wood was rotten. She managed to pry and break two slats apart enough so that she could see out. What she saw made her gasp. She was in a tower, one of the cathedral towers, and it was a long way down. She now understood why Father Cooper said that no outcry would do any good. Even if she weren't so hoarse, she realized she could never have made anyone on the ground hear her. How could she get anyone to notice her? She wondered. What I need is a banner, she told herself. But the blanket was a ratty gray, not bright enough to show up against the stone. And she was dressed in shades of brown. The only thing of color she had was her other mitten, and it was far too small. She sighed and shivered. The room hadn't been warm to start with, and opening the window was making it worse. Perhaps she could coax a fire to life in the brazier. The wood was there anyway. She did manage to get the fire going at last, and the bright flames gave her the best idea she'd had so far. If she could get a piece of wood burning, she might be able to use it like a torch if the wind didn't blow it out. It wouldn't be very visible in the daylight, but at night someone might see it. Of course, Father Cooper would probably come back before then and would tie her up again. Finally, she couldn't think of anything better to do, so she took her remaining mitten, put a piece of wood into it to give it some weight, dropped it out the window. Maybe someone would see it fall, or Maybe Jeffrey or one of the others would find it and put two and two together. Or maybe it wouldn't do good at all, but a single mitten wasn't much use. As she watched the piece of wood and the mitten fall, another idea came to her. She struggled back to the bag of wood and began pawing through it. At last she found what she was looking for, a piece of wood that fit her hands well enough to be to be used as a club. Maybe if she was lucky and Father Cooper was careless, she could bludgeon him with it when she came back to feed her. If he came back, she took a position where she hoped she would not be immediately visible and settled down to wait. I apologize for troubling you, Dame Agnes, Kenton began, but I fear there is no help for it. The dame took her cue from his grim tone and looked at the boys reproachfully. Now, what have you rascal been up to? Don't you know better than to bother poor Master Kenton with your naughtiness? She looked up at the organist coyly. Whatever have they been doing, dear Master Kenton? I think Geoffrey had better explain. Geoffrey opened his mouth to protest, but thought at the look better of it at the look Kenton gave him. It's a long story. It all began about 2 months ago when Nate and I met a girl named Alice Tuckfield on the street. I knocked her down by mistake, and it came out that she hadn't anywhere to go. We brought her here. We gave her supper and let her sleep in the cupboard on the third floor. The dame drew a sharp breath but didn't speak. Well, to make the tale shorter, we found out that she could sing, and it was my idea to cut her hair, hide her in the choir. We didn't think Master Frost would notice one new face, and we thought it would be a grand lark. He did notice her after about a week, but he didn't know she wasn't a boy, so he let her in. I'm talking about Pup Dame Agnes. The dame put her fist on her hips and leveled a steely glare at Geoffrey. Pup is a girl? You can't be serious. He nodded solemnly. You mean to tell me that there's been a girl in this house for 2 months? Geoffrey Fisher, how could you? I knew you to be a wretched little scamp, but I had no idea you were so lost to propriety as this. You had the audacity to foist some hoydenish brat on me and Master Frost? Didn't it ever occur to you that you sing in the cathedral choir? This is sacrilege and improper. I knew you didn't have much in the way of common decency, but this takes the bacon. Why, that's not all, Dame Agnes, Randall interjected. It certainly isn't, she shrilled. I barely have begun, young man. Pup's been kidnapped, Orlando cut in. The dame sat down abruptly. What? Why? But the uncle. Not her uncle, Geoffrey asserted. It was a ploy to keep you from raising the hunt for Pup. The dame rounded on Master Kenton. Is this true, or is this some elaborate prank they've hoodwinked you into? I only wish it were a prank, he told her. Father Boyce sent me along to make sure you believe the boys and to tell you that there's no need to punish them. He's taking the matter in hand. What's being done to find Pup? The dean asked, concern in her voice. The dean has taken the matter in hand as well, he told her. We're supposed to return to the deanery later. We will certainly keep you informed of any developments. The dame looked from the boys to the masters and back again. I think, she said, you'd better tell me the story from the beginning. The meeting with the dame was completely frustrating. He didn't have any news. Furthermore, he utterly forbade the boys to take action of any kind. He told them that he had sent for the sheriff and had indicated that he believed it likely that Father Cooper was in fact involved. Finally, he dismissed them, though he asked Master Frost to stay in case the sheriff had any questions for him. Once the boys and Master Kenton were out in the street, Orlando spoke up gloomily. My father says the only thing that grinds along slower than the mills of God is the authorities, and they don't grind as fine either. If we wait for them to find Pup, Nate was unable to finish the thought. I've got a half a mind to tell Father Cooper, Dean or no. Excuse me, Geoffrey muttered. Randall looked unhappy. I feel so helpless, and I can't shake the fear that we're too late already. Use your head, Master Kenton snapped. Why bother with the letter if they don't need time? They need to find Hunnis. That means London on horseback. That's he shrugged 3 days, maybe more with the snow, or less if he changes horses often and doesn't sleep much. Put in Nate gloomily. Call it 3 days. Once he's in London, there's no guarantee Hannes is there. He spent Christmas in Kirby Munside. Was it? Yes, but sir, it's not very far away at all. What if they're just going there? They wouldn't have bothered with the letter then, Kenton replied calmly. Will they murder Master Hannes, do you think? Geoffrey asked in a hushed tone. Master Kenton frowned. I don't believe they'll try it. It's too risky. I think they believe Puff is bluffing. But they don't quite dare to proceed with their plans until they know for certain. Is she, sire? Is she, sir? Nate asked. He shrugged. It doesn't matter. We'll find her before they've had word from London one way or the other. We'll find her. We'll find her, Orlando said. You mean us? But how? We heard the Dean. Devil the Dean. Hooray! Geoffrey crowed. But how shall we work the night watch? I can sneak out. Graham's a heavy sleeper. And you can fix things with the dame for Orlando, can't you, sir? Now, wait just a minute, Master Kenton said, spreading his hands. If you all just keep an eye on Father Cooper during the day, I'll take the night watch. That's not fair, Geoffrey protested. You know he's more likely to be taking food to Pup at night. Besides, you shouldn't be on guard all alone, sir. What if he sees you? I think I'm a match for that bag of wind, Kenton said grimly. Don't argue with me. This isn't a game, Geoffrey. There's no question or fair or unfair. But it's stupid to take foolish risks. Suppose he gave you the slip. We might lose our chance in finding Puff. Geoffrey. Geoffrey decided reluctantly. Where do you suppose Father Cooper is now? Nate asked. We could start looking at the cathedral, Randall said. If he isn't there, we can go to his house. And knock on his door and inquire whether he's home? Use your head, Randall, Geoffrey said tartly. It's Father C's day for evensong, isn't it? Master Kenton nodded. Then I recommend we each go home and make up excuses to miss dinner. And you, he added to Master Kenton, can go home and have a nap if you're going to insist on having your way. You mustn't fall asleep after all. Thank you, Geoffrey, Kenton said sarcastically. I think I can manage to stay awake without a nap. But other than that, your plan has some merit. Orlando, I'll go along with you. I think I can manage the dame for you. Geoffrey laughed. You could make her eat out of your hand if you mind to. A little before evensong, the four boys met on the south steps of the cathedral. Now that we're all here, let's go in, Orlando suggested. There's no sense of standing around like cows in the rain. Wait a minute, I've been thinking, Nate said. Won't Father Cooper think it's odd that we're all at evensong? He won't notice us, Geoffrey said confidently. Well, maybe not, Randall put in, but old Frost might, and he'll know we're up to something. But if we can't go in, how can we watch Father Cooper? Orlando asked. I think we'll just have to take our chances. No, I thought it out loud, Nate said. We can watch from the triforium. If we're careful, no one will see us. Oh, good job, Nate, Geoffrey said. Let's go. You know, Geoffrey whispered, when they had found a place with a good view of both the lectern and the sacristy door. I've been thinking, too, it's foolhardy of Kenton to want to tackle Father Cooper alone. So I told my Gram I'd be at your house overnight, Nate. Nate gasped, and she'd believed you? It must be nice. Well, I'm not sure she did, actually. She's pretty cagey. But all she did was look at me rather oddly and say, well, boys will be boys, I suppose. Randall shook his head. My mother subjected me to a positive inquisition. How did you and Sourface make out with the Dame Orlando? He grinned. I've never seen anything like it. Dame Agnes smiled and nodded and poured tea. Master Kenton could have told her anything. He could have told her that he was taking me to the knackers to be made into glue, and she would have agreed to it. Nothing could have been easier. At that moment, Master Kenton began the prelude, and the boys broke out of their conversation. When the service was over, Father Cooper went to the sacristy to take off his vestments. The boys watched the door like cats at a mouse hole. Finally, the priest emerged, wrapped in a cloak, and set off at a brisk pace toward the west end of the cathedral. The boys hurried quietly along the triforium, keeping him in sight. Sprint ahead, Orlando, and go down the stairs, Geoffrey advised. We don't want to lose him. The boys watched from the doorways as Father Cooper started down the steps across the close to the door, I'm sorry, close toward his house on Pen- Princeton Torres Lane. He hadn't gone very far when he stooped down and picked up something off the ground. Then he turned back toward the boys. They melted into the shadows of the doorway as quickly as they could, but the priest didn't seem to notice them. He was looking up at the roof or at the towers with a frown on his face. Finally, he turned around and started briskly off briskly for home. That was close. Geoffrey breathed deeply. Come on. They followed the priest from a discreet distance and arrived at his house in time for to see him disappear inside. They sheltered in an adjacent doorway to take counsel. The old tub of lard is probably sitting down to dinner, Orlando said. I wish we could join him. I'm hungry. There must be a back door, Randall said. Someone ought to watch. I'll go, Nate volunteered. Want to come, Geoffrey? Geoffrey displayed some coins triumphantly. I'm going to trot down to the White Hart and get us some meat pasties. Blessed Geoffrey, Randall laughed. You think of everything. A few minutes later, when Geoffrey returned, only Orlando was watching the front of the house. Randall went to check on Nate, and he explained, Listen, Geoffrey, shall I sneak out and join you tonight? It would be easy once the dame's in bed. If you're caught, it'll mean a beating, Geoffrey warned. Do you think you're the only one willing to risk a beating for Pup's sake? He demanded hotly. Geoffrey grinned and clapped Orlando on the back. I'm glad I'm not. It'll be nice to have company, Orlando, but I'd better take these pasties around to Randall and Nate before they're stone cold. An hour passed slowly, marked by the tolling of the cathedral bell. Nothing happened. The boys were cold and cramped from crouching in the shadows. Randall came around to the front to confer with Geoffrey and Orlando. It's getting late, he said. Maybe we should send someone off to get Master Kenton. My mother will start to worry if I'm not home soon. Before Geoffrey could reply, they heard the front door open. Shrinking into the shadows, they watched Father Cooper descend the steps. They held perfectly still, barely daring to breathe as he passed their hiding places and continued down the street. Quick, Randall, Geoffrey whispered. Get Nate while we start after him. Cautiously, they followed Father Cooper. He led them straight through the streets to the cathedral and disappeared inside. The boys hesitated. Then Geoffrey carefully eased the door open a crack and peered inside. The priest had lit a lantern. Geoffrey could see the light bobbing along half the nave away. He opened the door further and slipped inside, motioning for the others to follow. Split up, Geoffrey breathed. Follow from the aisle and the triforium. If he sees one of us, someone go for Kenton. They nodded as they scattered on silent feet. Geoffrey went softly up the center of the nave, keeping Father Cooper's light in sight. The priest turned into the sacristy. Geoffrey crept to the door, straining his ears. He could hear the priest moving about, opening cupboards. Geoffrey crouched down in the shadows behind the chair. The priest came back through the door carrying something, a silver ewer, and Geoffrey couldn't see clearly. He edged a little nearer, a cloth sack with, could it be a loaf of bread? He had to be sure. As he crept closer, his foot struck the leg of the chair, which scraped along the floor with the noise of thunder. The priest whirled about. Geoffrey had just time to register that it was in fact a loaf of bread before the priest swooped down on him like a falcon, striking and hauled him to his feet by his hair. And we're going to stop there.